Hi, I'm Tommy. Welcome to another episode of PhotoTips. This month we're going to take a viewer request for some long exposures. Um, it's Halloween, or they're around Halloween. You'll probably be actually viewing this in November. Nevertheless, we've still got the Halloween seasonal twist. We're going to take some long exposures at night here in the cemetery, and trust me, it's very, very dark here after the sun goes down. And we're going to see what we can come up with on that. Also, we're going to try something a little different. We're going to try some long exposures of the stars, and you can actually see the rotation of the Earth in the star patterns. It's pretty interesting, and we'll cover a few pros and cons, pitfalls, things to watch out for when doing long exposures, and also some necessary equipment. Speaking of equipment, one thing that you're going to need is a camera that can do long exposures. Most of them have a bulb setting, and that's what you'll need to use to lock the shutter open for over 30 seconds, which is the default longest setting most cameras have. The ones that we're going to fool with are going to be in the minutes area. So you're going to need a cable release. Cable release basically hooks onto your camera, and it's either mechanical or electronic depending on your type of camera, but you can lock it down and time your exposures using a watch or some timing device and judge your exposures like that. Cable releases come in several varieties. The one that we've got here is mechanical. You push the plunger down and turn the set screw to hold it down. When you get finished, just release the set screw. And like I said, you'll have to do some manual timings to get your exposures right. Well, let's take a look at the samples that we're taking here, and let's discuss them and see what we can do. Okay, we've got several samples I took here. They were all taken on the tripod with the camera in the same direction. You can see this is a 2-minute exposure, 119.8 seconds, so that's pretty well 2 minutes. I timed that with my watch. I was pretty lucky to get it that close. The length of that exposure was basically some kind of educated guesswork from doing this in the past. There's really not a scientific method in determining how long of an exposure that you should take. Light meters generally don't read into the minutes, so I basically start around 2 minutes depending on the brightness of the image, and then kind of bracket from there. Bracket means, decrement or increment your exposure based on kind of previewing in the LCD of the camera when you get finished with your exposure. I looked up pretty close on the 2 minute. It looks pretty pleasing. This was in the cemetery. It goes along with our Halloween theme for the October or the fall months. And anyway, it was so dark in there I could barely see how to walk between the gravestones without tripping. There was a small street light way off in the distance to the left, and that's why you're seeing the strong shadows going from left to right. It was quite a distance off, and the light was very weak. I tried to find a cemetery around here with no street lights whatsoever, but that's almost impossible to find, so this was best I could do. When you're taking these long exposures, there's a couple of pitfalls to watch out for. One of them is color shift. You have that same problem if you take long exposures with film or with digital. I think with film it's a lot harder to compensate for. I shot these images with RAW like I always do, and that allowed me to tweak the color balance, the white balance on the image, to get it more like what I think it should have looked like. The other downfall is sensor noise. When you take a long exposure, some of the pixels in there are stronger or weak. I'm not sure exactly which, but they make real hot spots in the picture, and they show up as colored blotches, which you can see here. There's some blue and red ones, and they're really distracting and make the picture almost unusable in my opinion. So what I did was turned on long exposure noise reduction. If you look up here at the top, you can see it's off on this image. Let's go back and take a look at the other one again, and you can see it's on.
And how that really works is it takes the 2-minute exposure to get the image that you want, and then the camera is actually busy for another 2 minutes taking another picture with the shutter closed. And what that does is it gets these hot pixels, because we took the image of the same length of time. It takes a black picture with these exact same pattern of hot pixels, and then it'll subtract those against the real image that you took, and you end up with this. So pretty ingenious method, really. It's not totally flawless, because if you look at some of these, you'll see some dark spots in the image. This would actually print up pretty nicely, whereas the other one wouldn't. Those would show up like a sore thumb, and the dark spots would be barely noticeable. I was going to try one other technique. I wanted to do the typical stereotype long exposure of the tail lights and the traffic, but the weather's been very unpredictable around here, and I did not get a chance to do that. I did try one other long exposure technique, which I think was pretty interesting, and I took this one. This is a 5-minute exposure of the sky, and we can see the stars, the Earth's rotation in the stars. Actually, that evening there was supposed to be a meteor shower, and while I didn't see one with my naked eye, I apparently caught one in my exposure, because you can see the streak going against the way the rotation is in the sky. So I'm pretty sure that would have been one of the meteors from the meteor shower that was supposed to be around that evening. Thought that was pretty neat. This 5-minute exposure, it was pitch black out there, and this tree, I didn't even see it in the viewfinder actually when I was pointing the viewfinder up to the sky to take the image. So that kind of gives you an idea of some things that you could see. It's a lot of fun to take those long exposures like that, and you get some really neat or eerie results depending on the subject matter. It's pretty fun. Long exposures are also a lot of fun at night, and people use them typically on water scenes to make the water look almost misty or real smooth, and it's a pretty neat effect. And we may do some of those in a later date. I thought this was a pretty neat image. We've got some of both of those techniques together. We've got the cemetery down here lit up, but we also have the stars in the sky. And if I could have found a place just a little bit darker, this would have been more exaggerated. I may try to get around and find one different cemetery. Since I'm kind of new to this area, I've had a limited selection to choose from. But anyway, I think you agree that's a pretty interesting result.
Well, as you can see, that's a pretty dramatic images, especially the graveyard ones. I think that's really awesome. When I took those pictures here, you could hardly see at all how to even walk into the place. After looking at the images, it almost looks like it was lit up. Like I said, there was a small street light way out over in the distance over there, and that was pretty much the only light source. It just got amplified by using the over 2-minute exposure. Go out and give those a try, and I think you'll find it a lot of fun. As always, if you have any other suggestions for photo tips in upcoming episodes, give me an email, tmartin@amateurlogic.tv, and I'll do my best to get them on. Have any questions or comments about this episode, same address. I'll see you next month on Photo Tips. Thanks.